Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to the segment of Coach Gurbani's a-sabad-a-day. We will be reciting the 6th Salok and Pauri of Gaudi Sukhmani, Mahalla Panjwa, and the recitation. Salok Kaam Krodh ar Lobh Moh binas jaye aham ev Nanak Prabh Saranagati Kar Prasad Gurdev. So in the Salok, Nanak seeks the guidance of the Gurdev. Kar Prasad Gurdev. Prasad, grace. It also means insight. That is to say, insight into the teachings of the Guru. So Nanak seeks that guidance. Kar Prasad Gurdev, in order to find the self within. Nanak Prabh Saranagati. Saranagati is to find the feet, but what it really means is to find alignment, to essentially recognize the self within, the Prabh self. And the Prabh usually denotes that dimension of the self, which is wisdom and knowledge. And we know that knowledge and wisdom cannot be separated from each other, from the name. That which is signified by the name and its knowledge go hand in hand. So the Guru is instructing us to seek the grace of the Gurudev, of the enlightener, of Gurbani, Gurmat, in order that we may meet with our own selves, so that we might meet ourselves. Oddly enough, but that is the truth. We don't know ourselves. And the reason to do this is it'll teach you how to Kaam Krodh ar Lobh Moh binas jaye aham ev. To shatter the ego, you need the Gurudev. So from the Gurudev to the Prabh is really a continuum. These are different states of assimilation that one has to progress through along this path. So that's the Salok. Seek that guidance so that you can find your true self. And then in the Ashtapadi, why do that? Because the Guru says, Jai Prasad. That is the alliterative phrase. What the Guru is saying, by whose grace of favor you have this gift of life, it befits you to be mindful of that source, to know that source. Problem is we don't. And that is what the Ashtapadi does. It lists out in various ways the many things that we do, the things that we feel entitled to, the resources that are available to us, the good food, home, what have you. Now, the Guru lists out in quite some detail in the Ashtapadi all of the things, and he essentially precedes that with Jai Prasad, meaning it is by the favor of the self that all of these things that I'm listing out to you are made available. In short, you've been brought into existence because of the compassion of the self. So your primary duty is to know the self. And so let's look at the Ashtapadi and the list that he lays out for us to understand. He says, by whose favor, remember, that is the alliteration. Jai Prasad, Chatti Amrit Khai, Tis Thakur Ko Rakh Man Maaye. That is the first admonition. By whose favor you enjoy delicacies, Chatti Amrit, all kinds of pleasures, be mindful of that master. Jai Prasad, Sugandhat Tan Lave, Tyo Jao, Tisko Simrit Param Gati Pave. by whose favor you perfume your body. Remember that self so that you can attain to the highest state. And by whose favor you live in comfort. Jai prasad basne sukha mandir. Tise tyaye sada mane andar. Focus the mind on that self which is within. The Guru uses the word tyaye quite a bit. And that is because attention, focused attention, is part of the process of Simran, which we spoke about a couple of passages ago. So, focus the mind, attention, attend to it. And again, you live within a happy family. Greh sang sukha basna, art pehar simro tis rasna. That self in the 8 watches of the day and night, be constantly aware. So the Guru says, live in self-awareness. Jai prasad rang ras bhog, Nanak sada tyaiye tyavan jog. Again tyaiye, awareness. That self is worthy of your awareness. And then in the second Ashtapadi, Jai prasad part patambar handave. More of the same theme. The wearing of silken robes. Tise tyag kat avar lubhave. Why would you renounce that one and be enticed by the other, meaning Maya or the senses, when it is through the favor of the self that you wear silken robes, that you sleep in comfortable beds? Sukh sej soi jai. So, man, O mind, Aat paharta ka jas kijai. Glorify that one. And by whose favor you are acclaimed in the world. Jai prasad tuj sabko manne. People acknowledge you, your presence. Speak of that wondrous one. Mukhta ko jas rasana bakhanne. With your speech, with your intellect. Speak of that wondrous one. In other words, find that wondrous one. By whose favor you live up to your convictions. My mind, the Guru says, Man sada tyai keval par brahm. That supreme being, always meditate on it. Prabhuji japat dhargah man pave, nanak pat seti kar jave. By realizing the self, you enter that realm of the Supreme Consciousness and you return to the source with honor. We might note here that returning to the source, Gurbani is replete with the idea of travel, a return home to your natural habitat. This is something that we ought to pay attention to because it is reminding us that this world is but a temporary sojourn. It will come to an end. And there is a return home. Kar jave. We need to pay attention to that. What is that kar jave? Where are we going back to? Obviously not a physical space, but something to bear in mind as we do the Sukhmani Sahib and read Gurbani. And then he goes on. Jai prasad arog kanchan dehi liv labo tis ram snehi. So he lists out the favor and then admonishes us to actually get centered with that self. By whose favor, he says, you have received this pristine human apparatus. Attune your consciousness with love to that Ram self. Jai prasad tera ola rehat, man mukh pave har har jas kahat. Man sukh pave har har jas kahat. Again, by whose favor you remain protected. Ola rehat. My mind, find peace by incorporating the virtues of that divine self. Jai prasad tere sagal chidra take, man sarani par thakur prabhatake. By whose favor your faults are covered. In other words, this self overlooks your faults. Submit yourself to such a master. Jeh prasad tujhko na pahuche. By whose favor you are the highest in the range of creation, is referring to the human species being the highest. Mana sas simro prab uche. Attune your mind to that highest prab self. Jeh prasad pai durlabh dehi, nanak taki bhagat karehi. So by whose favor you have this hard to get body, Nanak advises you, devote yourself to that one. Jeh prasad apokhan pehri jai. Man tis simrat kyon alas kije. Why do you hesitate? Why are you postponing this eventual meeting? By whose favor you adorn yourself with jewelry, by whose favor you ride elephants and horses, by whose favor you inherit beautiful orchards, gardens, and wealth, and the one that has given you this human form. Why would you postpone meeting that source? So the Guru advises us, Uthat baithat sadat se tyai. In all states of being, be attentive, fix your mind. What that means is be self-aware. Tise tyai jo ek alkh hai, that one that is indescribable. Yahan uhan nanak teri rakhay, the one that protects you everywhere. Don't postpone it. Kyun alas kari jai? Why are you being lazy about it? Indolent. Jeh prasad karhe pun bahudan, by whose bounty you engage in charity. In other words, who gives you the bounty to be able to do charity, by whose grace you preserve your noble traditions. Jeh prasad tu achar vyavhari, by whose grace you have been favored with a handsome form. Again, a reminder, Jai Prasad Tera Sundar Roop, So Prabh Simro Sada Anup, attuned to that self, whose beauty is unequaled. Jai Prasad Teri Niki Jat, by whose grace you have found status. Always stay attuned to that self, and by whose grace your honor is preserved, glorify that self. Guru Prasad Nanak Jas Kahe, through the Guru's guidance. We've spoken about this in the Salok. You need the Guru's guidance in order to walk this journey. Jai Prasad Suneh Karan Naad, Jai Prasad Pekhe hai Bismad, Jai Prasad Bole hai Amrit Rasna, Jai Prasad Sukh Sehje Basna, Jai Prasad Hast Kar Chalai, Jai Prasad Sampurna Phalai, Jai Prasad Param Gat Pave, Jai Prasad Sukh Sehj Samave, Aisa Prabh Tyage Avar Kat Lago, Gur Prasad Nanak Man Jago. And this is the climax, the 7th Ashtapadi, where he is just listing out all of these things. The grace of having the ears to hear celestial music, the grace for seeing awe-inspiring sight, the grace of having the tongue, all the organs, which has speech and language, the happiness of spontaneity, Sehje Basna, the grace of motion of hands and feet, and a fruitful life, by whose grace you are capable of achieving the highest destiny. How can you separate yourself from such a self? The Guru says, Aisa prabh tyage avar kat lago. How can you attach yourself to fleeting pleasures? With the help of the Guru Enlightener, Gur Prasad, Nanak man jago. Says Nanak, awaken the mind. In the seventh pauri, Jeh Prasad, tu pragat sansare, tis prabh ko mool na mano bisare. Remember that your manifestation in this world, at all levels, is because of the self. You are a manifestation of that self. And through whose favor and grace, Tera Pratap, you are distinguished. Re man moor tu taako jap, my asleep mind, realize that self. Jai Prasad, tere karaj pure, tise jaan man sada hazure. By whose grace your purposes are accomplished. My mind, know that self to always be in your present. Understand that it is always present. Jeh Prasad, tu paame sach, by whose grace you receive virtues. Re man mere, tu tasyo raj. Cleave yourself unto that self. Raj, cleave yourself to that self. And by whose grace humanity is saved, says Nanak, I meditate on the self. So in the end, in the eighth Ashtapadi, he says, Aap japaye, jape so now, aap gavaye, so har gun gao, prabh kirpa te hoye pragas, prabhu daya te kamal begas, prabh so prasanna base man soi, prabh daya te mati uttam hoi, सर्ब निधान प्रभ तेरी मया, आपहो कछु न किन्हु लया, जित जित लावहों तित लगे हर नाथ, नानक इनके कछु न हाथ. A fascinating Ashtapadi. He sums it all up. In order to traverse this path, self-realization, the path of self-actualization, he says, is possible only when you have the motivation for it, or when you're inspired by the self. Aap japaye jape so now. And the assimilation of divine possibilities, qualities, is possible only, again, when you're inspired, motivated by the self. Aap gavaye so har gun gaye, prabh kirpa te hoye pragas. Now he speaks about kirpa. The motivation is ours, but the grace is the self's. Grace is that element that we do not control. It can appear in a flash. It can come at any instant. But the motivation must come from ourselves. We have to be inspired by the idea that we are of the essence. So unless you are motivated, you're not going to get on this path, and you're going to stay as miserable as you are. So in the end, the Guru assures us that grace is not within our hands. Nanak inke kashuna haath. Jit jit lave tit lage. It comes as it pleases. It causes you to become motivated, is another way of putting it. But we are talking about motivation, inspiration, effort has to be made, but grace is not within our hands. Because if we could just simply make the effort, that would become another egoic activity. Because the self is not causal, you see. Therefore, we cannot cause it to happen. It causes us to happen, rather. So it is not an egoic activity, but we have to prepare ourselves. We have to assimilate, as the Salok says, from the Guru to understand where we are going and how. There is an assimilation of knowledge at various levels. And then you eventually realize at one point that actually no effort is going to get you there. But you have to go through the cycle of the effort. That assimilation has to happen. On that note, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Until the next time.